Welcome to Read Church. I'm Marshall Fant, the Director of Church Consulting and Strategic Planning for Gospel Fellowship Association Missions. My purpose is to encourage pastors and church leaders as you refocus, renew, and revitalize your churches. We've established this podcast to offer practical tips and suggestions as you equip disciples to make disciples. Marshall Fant, welcome back to GFA Missions Read Church. So glad to have you tuning in or watching or listening on your favorite podcast platform. It's a privilege for me to do this. Appreciate GFA hosting this and taking it all and putting all together, the video, the audio, and staging the platform. So thanks to the GFA team for this. And today we want to cover really a second part of a topic we covered back in February 10th. We released a podcast on AI. What is it? How does it work? And today I want to do a follow-up podcast with that. It's another good friend, Dr. David Shumate. Welcome back to Read Church.
Yeah, good to be back. Good to see you.
Yeah, so Dr. Shumate is now out at International Baptist College in Arizona. And are you teaching any classes? I meant to ask you that. Are you as well as
I'm the academic
dean,
but I teach part-time, so I teach some undergrad classes, some graduate classes, yeah.
You teach in Hebrew?
I'm planning on it the next time it comes around.
Okay. All right. So for those who are not Dr. Shumate got his PhD in Old Testament from Bob Jones, so appreciate his diligence in all his studies, and he's been a treat to have on, and each time we've talked to him. So I wanted to pick his brain on this. So in the Frontline magazine, in the January-February of 2025 edition, they devoted most of the edition to AI. It's very interesting the way Dr. Shumate approached the article, and he did an AI interview with Spurgeon. So tell us, what was the background? How did you come up with this topic? It's a wonderful, creative topic.
Well, I was experimenting with AI. I've been experimenting with it for about a year, a little over a year. And so, it's not my background really. I just thought this is something that should be helpful for us in education and something we're going to have to know about and teach our students about. So I just started experimenting with it. And I got the idea in one of my classes. It was a class on bibliology. So I gave my students an assignment. I said, you have an assignment to interview Benjamin Warfield on inspiration. And so I gave it as an assignment because I thought it would be a really neat way to test whether they could ask good questions. Oh. So the issue wasn't so much the answers. The issue was whether they could ask appropriate questions. And then once they ask a question, could they follow up? And I thought of it as a diagnostic tool to help me understand as a teacher how well they understood inspiration and Warfield's formulation of the doctrine of inspiration. So that was kind of on my mind, and I thought, well, this might be something kind of interesting. We've had, sometimes you'll have in a church, someone will come and, be Spurgeon for an evening. They will kind of dress up like Spurgeon and give kind of a talk. And I kind of thought, well, that kind of makes it come to life. So I said, well, this would be a good experiment to see if we could do that in print form and see what the result is. And so that was where the idea came from. And then the question is, why pick Spurgeon? Well, I picked Spurgeon because he's well known to us.
Yeah.
And because many of us have read his sermons, or we've read his sermons ourselves, or we've read his books, some of his books. And so it would be easier for us to tell whether it sounds like Spurgeon or not than if I'd pick someone who was kind of obscure and they'd never heard of. So that was the idea. And of course, the other benefit is everything Spurgeon ever wrote is in the public domain.
Sure.
So,
sure.
So you don't have to worry about whether you're improperly using someone's material. So picking someone from the past, I think. And the final one was there's just this massive amount of material on the web about Spurgeon.
Right.
So it sort of was an easy target.
Okay.
To hit.
That's interesting. All right. So what I want to do in this podcast, I just want to interact with Dr. Shumate, some of his observations and some definitions. I think because as we all our lives are interwoven with AI right now. And it only looks like it's going to be more so, whether it be personally or especially in the ministry. So I just want to interact with some of his observations on the interview with Spurgeon through AI. And I really think we can get some good practical applications from your observations. So is that okay with you? That's kind of the direction we're going to go with.
Glad to do it.
Sure. Okay. So one of your comments, so as we get started with some definitions, if you could use the word prompt and response. And that's
Well,
what
yeah. Basically, the prompt is just what you tell the AI, telling it what you want, and then the response is what the AI tells you in response to your request.
All right. So when you had your students do, you said the assignment you gave them on B.B. Warfield was so they would know how to follow up with good prompts, right? Ask good questions.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So basically, prompt is what you say, and then the response is what the AI says.
So the more detailed prompt we give, the more detailed response AI is going to give?
Yes. In general, I think the quality of your response is based on the quality of the prompt.
Okay.
Now, one thing to understand about this whole discussion about AI is that AI is rapidly developing and changing. And so, for example, even just 6 months ago, a lot of people were talking about prompt engineering and how people could specialize in how to prompt AIs to get good responses, and they could teach you how to give a good prompt. And there are some good guidelines for prompts. But also they're building AIs that are better able to figure out what you want, even if your prompt's not the best prompt. So it's a moving situation. So when so I could say something today, and then in 6 months, it could be that the technology's passed me by. But as a general rule, I think the way to think about artificial intelligence is a name that got applied to basically computer thinking, computer reasoning, and if you think about it, anything a computer does is in some sense artificial intelligence, right? Human beings can do math, but computers do math. Human beings can play chess, but computers now play chess better than human beings. And so it's in a sense, when we talk about artificial intelligence now, we're largely talking about the major ways we interact with it. So for example, large language models are language processors. They process natural language. There are other ones that are visual processors. So, for example, they can produce images or they can view images. And, of course, the technology and the particular architecture is constantly changing as they're finding better ways to do these things. But so when we think of artificial intelligence, I think we're basically thinking ChatGPT and the like.
So I guess the point I want to say is, all right, so we're recording this in April of 2025. So I think what Dr. Shumate is saying, okay, the answers he gives us today in 6 months, they could be different. Is that what
they might be different. They might be the same. It just depends on how things develop.
Okay. All right. So in your interview with Spurgeon over using AI, and again, I'm getting these straight from your January, February edition of Frontline. One of your first observation was that you explained how AI is trained to answer your questions from Spurgeon's point of view. All right, so define Spurgeon's point of view. I think you said it. So this is, Dave, tell me if I'm right. So AI takes your prompt, right? And then they start searching all of Spurgeon's writings to develop his point of view. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, let me read my prompt, and then that'll help you understand, I think, how it. So I said prompt. I said, assume the role of the famous 19th century English pastor Charles Haddon Spurgeon. I would like to interview you. Are you ready? Now, that was the prompt. And it said, reply, as Charles Haddon Spurgeon, I stand ready to engage in this interview. My life has been dedicated to preaching the gospel and shepherding the flock of Christ. I pray that our discourse may be edifying and glorifying to God. How may I assist you today? So it automatically, as soon as I said, I'd like you to assume the role, it went out and it tries to sound like Spurgeon. And the way they train the large language models is the first stage is they just give it massive amounts of text and other information. And so, I'm sure that all of Spurgeon's works, were in the training for this particular model. And so it basically says, okay, I'm going to find things on Spurgeon. I could have said, please emphasize or please prioritize Spurgeon's original works. Because in theory, if I'm asking about Spurgeon, it might go out and find sources that talk about Spurgeon as opposed to Spurgeon's own works. But given the massive amount of stuff that Spurgeon has out on the wrote and then is out on the internet, it's really easy for the AI to sort of sound like Spurgeon.
Got it. Okay, so I think as it's doing this, I think your comment number 2. Or observation number 2, use this phrase, AI is better at giving plausible answers than giving accurate answers, okay? And then you get into a word, hallucination. So as people are doing research, I want to make sure, again, if you're a novice like me with AI, and now I'm understanding this could maybe be a right answer and maybe not, okay? And so explain how that works, or what you have observed with that.
Well, my understanding is, and I have to say, I come with this as a non-expert, but my understanding from what I've read and observed is that part of the training of AI is reinforcement learning, where they go in and they actually find ways to fine-tune the AI to make it do what they want it to do. Okay. So, and that includes a way of giving it scores, which amount to essentially numerical rewards. So the AI is told it wants to maximize its score. So then by giving and I'm not saying this is exactly the way it works, but it's sort of like giving it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or by finding ways to evaluate answers, the AI learns to give the answer that the people have trained it want to get from the data. Now, of course, I presume that the people who train it want to get true answers, right? But the point is that the AI is trained to give answers that it thinks are acceptable to the user. And so now usually, right, those are answers that are also accurate. But that's why I say it is better at giving plausible answers than accurate answers. I don't want to give the impression by that it can't give accurate answers. It gives lots of accurate answers.
Sure. Yeah.
But the orientation is toward an answer and again, as a large language model, its architecture is designed to find the relationship between words. So it's looking for, as it's building out its sentences, given the whole context, it's looking for the next best word to put in. It's a linear process. Okay. So that's why I say plausible, because it's giving an answer that sounds like it's right. It's trained not to give answers that are nonsense. And so because of that, there is the possibility of it giving a wrong answer or making up an answer. And that's typically what they call hallucinations.
All right. So it could possibly make up an answer based on what they have, of analyzing the data, right? And it will say, okay, since this has happened, this could happen. And that's what you're calling hallucination?
Yes. In other words, it basically just give a wrong answer or make up something that never happened or whatever. And there are sort of very famous cases of that where people would search an AI. You query an AI, and then it would give an answer that's just flat wrong. And that's always a possibility. I would say the people that I'm listening to are saying that they're getting better. The AI models are getting better at producing accurate answers. But I think we're seeing an improvement along that line. But it is possible. One thing is that an AI, because it's a machine, we tend to think that it's always going to give the correct answer, just like a calculator. Right, but it doesn't work that way. So you have to be careful. You have to be vigilant to check and make sure that what it's giving you makes sense.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I wanted to go. So along with that, you use under your observation number 2, you talk about something called edge cases, EDGE, edge cases. You want to comment on that? Yeah,
and again, it seems that where AI has a lot of good data and where there's a lot of reinforcement of the data, it's pretty good at finding it. So, for example, if I wanted to say, where and how did the Revolutionary War start, assuming that there's agreement in the literature on that, right? Or tell me about the Gettysburg Address. Mm-hmm. I would expect there's just so much on the internet, and it all is saying basically the same thing. Right. So it's very unlikely that it's going to hallucinate about that. On the other hand, if I ask it about somebody in history and it doesn't know who that is, then will it try to make up an answer instead of telling me I don't know? And the way AIs are trained is they put in things that are called guardrails, where they try to get the AI to tell you I don't know. But there are times when those guardrails fail, and so the AI's natural inclination is to give you an answer based on what it looked at. It's almost like if I give a test to a student and the student doesn't really understand the question, but remembers that one or two of the words in the question were part of something the student read, and the student gives me an answer that's not related to my question. Right. And so it's a little bit like that, kind of a superficial analysis of what's out there, and it produces an answer that's not actually an accurate answer. Now, there's much more to that, and I would say there's vastly much more to that I don't know about. But I think that's what I understand is going on with that.
Yeah, and again, we are. I'm interviewing you as a professor, a pastor, a theologian, using AI versus an AI expert trying to get into the theological realm. So I think I just want to make sure the listeners that don't know you understand this is the context of me interviewing you.
Yeah, I'm not trying to make a startup or anything. You know? I mean,
No,
startup. That's not where I'm going with this.
You got enough to do with what you're doing. So
Yeah,
anyway, all right. So observation number 3: quotes attributed to Spurgeon that are problematic. So, where else or in what other uses of AI in pastoral work? How would you help us? You mentioned guardrails. So how would you help us maybe be aware or be on guard of using AI where things are problematic? Is that too broad a question?
Well, the first problem is, how do you know it's problematic?
Yeah.
Because if it sounds like Spurgeon, then how do you know he didn't say it? And so in my case, what I did was I did a couple of things. I used an AI to check the AI. I used a different AI, and I said, okay, read through this, and are there any claims in there that aren't verifiable? And a lot of AI now will actually show the sources, so they'll show the work. There was a time there originally when the AI models just had what they were trained on and didn't know anything, couldn't access anything after that. And so, but a lot of models now actually go out and do research. So you can actually check your work that way.
Wow, I didn't know that.
If you're using one of those, you can actually go check your sources, which is what you would do if let's say someone said to you, oh, a Spurgeon said, and they give you a quote and you want to preach that. You say, did he really say that? It turns out it was, Abraham Lincoln, or, the way it is, right? If you don't know who said something, you attribute it to Martin Luther or Charles Spurgeon, and go on. But nowadays people can check. So that's the kind of thing you have to do. You have to check your work. And so through using some various tools, I was able to discern that there was part of a quotation in this response that couldn't be found. And so that's what I labeled as a potential hallucination.
Yeah. Okay. Now, you mentioned, I think, did you do this on originally with ChatGPT? Is that what you did?
No, I use Claude 3.5 Sonnet.
Okay. All right. You mentioned some other ones. I think you fact checked it with Copilot. Is that right?
Yes, and Copilot uses the ChatGPT architecture. Uses the ChatGPT model. Microsoft
didn't know that. Okay.
So the 4.0 or the 4 series basically. And so it's using essentially ChatGPT to check it.
All right. Now, disclaimer: we're not putting you as a guru in AI, but you are a man, you are a pastor, you're a theologian working in the world of pastoral ministry, of educating others. And so as you have probably dabbled in this more than most of us, so ChatGPT, so what I'm trying to do is, if a guy's saying, I don't even know where to start. Okay, so if that's the case, Dr. Shumate, what would this be, some that you have found maybe user-friendly for us novices? So ChatGPT, you mentioned Microsoft Copilot.
Yeah, I haven't tried all of them. I've tried some, so I'll tell you what I've tried.
Yeah, that'd be good.
I've done a very little bit with ChatGPT. I've mainly used the Copilot because we use the Microsoft ecosystem with our ministry. And so it's already there available. So, since it's using ChatGPT, I've used it a whole lot. There are certain, I'll get into that a little bit, but so I've used that a lot. So I haven't used ChatGPT a whole lot. I did experiment one thing with ChatGPT. They just came out with a new image generator model that's integrated into their main transformer model instead of having to farm that out to another kind of AI. And I asked it to give me an image of Charles Spurgeon preaching in the Metropolitan Tabernacle, and in the style of an oil painting. And it produced for the first. And I've tried Spurgeon before, just as an experiment. That's the first time I've gotten a response back where Spurgeon really looked like I think Spurgeon looked. I mean, based upon pictures and other things I've seen. So they're getting better. So ChatGPT has just put out a bunch of features, and so it keeps changing, which is fascinating. And then I tried this prompt with Copilot, and then I ended up trying it with Claude. And Claude sounded a lot more like I think Spurgeon should have sounded. ChatGPT sounded like an AI trying to talk like Spurgeon. Claude sounded like Spurgeon. I mean, of course, what do I know Spurgeon sounded like? That's an important point. But based upon, listening to a lot of his sermons being read and reading some of his books and stuff. So you say, okay, that sounds like Spurgeon. And so I went with Claude because it was more realistic in terms of its ability to do that. Anthropic, which set up Claude, is, I think, interested in, they do a lot of research into what's called alignment, which is how AIs align with human values. So they do experiments on what's going on in the AI. They safety test AI. So, they represent themselves, and I think they are considered to be an AI safety oriented company. So, but in any event, I wasn't worried about this. There's no real danger in doing this. Right. But so that's Claude. And then Google has put out some really high-powered products lately that are very helpful. One is they have developed, and they're not the only ones, but they've developed a deep research model where instead of just going out and kind of superficially hitting the internet and giving you the first answer that comes to its mind, so to speak, it actually works through complicated research problems. Might take 5 or 10 minutes, but it can produce some very extensive and even some deep kind of research. So it gives you all the list of sources at the end. And
how do you spell that?
Gemini, G.
Oh, Gemini. Okay, Gemini.
Yeah.
I was thinking, how do you spell Claude? You keep speaking of that.
Claude. I'm actually. Don't ask me to spell, please.
You let AI do that for you.
I mean, if you could invent an AI whiteboard that would spell check your when you're writing on it, I think teachers would pay $1 million for that.
I bet they would.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about this. All right, so again, I'm just throwing all this out. You comment as you want to. In observation number 4, you bring up a very good point of possible plagiarism. All right, now we know in the world of pastoral ministry, Dr. Shumate, over the last few years, there's been so much of this being, what is plagiarism? Because is it public domain? If you hear somebody else's sermon using the same sermon illustrations, this has been a big deal. Some guys have resigned over it. Some guys have blown it off. But so plagiarism, has been a topic in our world of people using sermon illustrations others have come up with. So please comment on how AI may add to this problem and how men can protect their credibility or lose their credibility using AI. Now, I just threw a lot at you, okay? So plagiarism, AI, giving credit. How do you start with that?
Let me make a quick distinction between copyright and plagiarism.
Okay.
Copyright is legal protection and prevents other people from copying or distributing something that you wrote that's under copyright. All right. And so that's a legal question, and copyrights expire right after a period of time. Plagiarism is more of an ethical. It's not really a legal thing. It's more of an ethical thing.
Okay.
And plagiarism is essentially claiming credit for something that you didn't do. And so the plagiarism occurs in different realms, and different realms have different standards for what constitutes plagiarism. I'm interested in it from a teaching standpoint, or if you have someone who's doing academic writing, a student is writing an academic paper, a doctoral student is doing a dissertation, someone is writing a journal article for a journal. There, the standards are very particular when it comes to what constitutes plagiarism. Right. And I won't go into the details, but it's very, very particular, and you have to cite certain ways, and you have to make sure you do certain things and don't do certain things. With regard to pastors and sermons, it's the standard of expectation that is current. That's the issue. And so, for example, I don't believe pastors are expected to put footnotes and to give footnotes in their preached sermons about every single point they got from a commentary, for example. Sure. Okay, so that's not a reasonable expectation when it comes to giving a sermon or giving a speech or something like that. On the other hand, if you totally copy someone else's speech and deliver it as yours, or take someone else's sermon and deliver it as yours, that would be certainly considered plagiarism. Right. Then the question is, what about the in-between cases? Various people have given an illustration, not just one person. So you might say, as so-and-so said, or, you might want to attribute that, and when you can, you should. So that's really the level we're talking about, right? pulling
Yes.
whole points out, pulling whole messages out, even maybe taking illustrations if they're unique. There are lots of illustrations that lots of people use.
Sure.
Now, how does AI impact that? I don't know that AI makes that a lot worse, because as it is, you heard something, right? Oftentimes we're using illustrations of things we heard preached. We don't remember where we heard it. So I don't know that AI makes it a whole lot worse. What you have to be careful is, AI, when I was dealing with plagiarism, the question was, does AI just sort of copy stuff from the internet and give it to you as output? And the answer is really no. That's not the way they work. They work by taking all of this data in and relating all the words together. And then when you ask it a question, it looks at all of that sort of relationship between all these words from all of these sources, and it then produces an answer. So it's not really producing by itself unless you ask it to. It's not really producing verbatim anybody's stuff. On the other hand, if something is in the internet a lot, it might end up, can I say, by accident, producing a verbatim quote, which is something you might do if you're writing a paper, and you have to be careful you're not plagiarizing if you're just doing it with your brain. So those are the issues with it. I think the main thing is you just got to check it. You can't just assume that if it came out of the computer, it's fine.
Yeah, and I was thinking, because just playing around, you can say, okay, I would like a 3-point sermon on Philippians chapter 3 where Paul emphasizes this, and it can lay it out for you. Mm-hmm. AI can produce that for you. So I guess the question I just want to, or in my mind, I don't want our pastors to become lazy, okay, in that area of just copying something. Because really, the way I see it is part of the shepherd's, the pastor's, the preacher's job is to get into the word itself, right? Let it change you, and then you produce the message God has for you. Right. And
well,
I guess,
yeah, that's a very important point. And I worry about that I think about that as a teacher. Yeah. Our students, they have access to AI, and they're going to have to use AI. They're going to be exposed to AI and interact with AI in the world. It's just coming. It's like saying you can't use the internet, right? And so it's happening. So they need to be wise in their use of AI. And AI can do some really helpful things for you. It can also make you lazy, right? You can also rely on it to do things you ought to do. So the question then comes in, what's the wise course? What are some tasks that I give you, for instance, we used to have to be able to parse Greek verbs.
Yeah.
And then we would do word studies. We'd look them up in books.
Yeah.
We would look up get a concordance and look it up. And we might be able to do a word study if it occurred 10 times or 15 times, but if it's 300 times or, 80 times, it just became onerous. We couldn't do good word studies that way. So then we'd rely on the lexicon. We'd say the lexicon says this. And so we're really relying on other people's work, which is not wrong. Now, but when the computer search engines came out, I can now do a word study on pretty much, I just scroll over it and I can ask it to give me a word study. Mm-hmm. And so that's before AI. That's just computer text, right? The tag text. So I can do things now. I can actually produce better sermons and have more confidence that my conclusions are correct, and I'm not just relying on the opinion of someone else. So that's a positive side. I think that most preachers, most pastors would say, I probably don't. It's not bad to know how to parse at least a little bit, and to kind of at least I got to understand grammar if I'm going to understand the syntax and all that. But I'm not. My job isn't reading a Greek text and parsing it. Right. And so I think most of us feel like it's perfectly legitimate to use those tools. So I think we have the same kind of paradigm with AI. Yeah. How can AI help me without doing things that I'm supposed to do?
Yeah, it's well said. Well said. So which brings us to observation number 5. So again, I think you kind of addressed it. So where's the balance? So, all of us, I'm just reading a book written in the late 1600s on pastoral theology, okay, and it talks about making visits, and making visits in those days was quite different from making visits in today's world. So I guess where in your recommendation, again, because you're a preacher, you're an educator, and you have a lot to get done. And in your world of theology, Dr. Shumate, let me ask you this. So how, this is just, I know your opinion, but what would be one or two ways that I really can use AI to be more efficient, okay, in my time and stewardship of time without really robbing myself of the pleasure of studying God's word in depth to prepare a sermon? Okay, does that make sense? So I mean, where
Oh, yeah.
So where do I go to AI? Do I use it like a commentary? Do I use it to get the big picture? So how do I become an efficient in sermon prep mainly, or in my theological studies? So where can AI help me be more efficient, therefore hopefully more effective, without becoming lazy?
Yeah.
Right? So in your world, just tell me from your world,
Right.
how you see that.
Of course, I've used it more in education than I have in actual sermon preparation. But
Okay.
from what I've observed and seen, I think there's some things that really where AI helps me. Let me just give some examples of that.
That'd be great.
One place AI helps me is it helps me do more in-depth and thorough research.
Okay.
And it's faster at it. So I could go out and look at all these different sources and try to find the answer myself, or I could ask AI to show me, I'd give a question to AI and see what it says. But I'm treating it as a brainstorming partner more than as an authority in the sense of telling me what my, and it's interesting to me. The other thing that's helpful is that you can interact with it. I encourage people to go back and forth with the AI. For example, I can ask it a question, it gives me an answer, and I said, well, what about this? And I could say, I would have thought that this would be a better approach to this passage. And then it might just agree with you. It tends to be sometimes sycophantic and say, yeah, you're right. Bring an answer. If you need a little ego boost, just talk to the AI, because it's always telling you how wonderful you are and how great your answers are. But the point is that it's almost like, I like this illustration. If you want to learn to get better tennis, then maybe you go out and you hit a tennis ball with somebody and you play games and you do that. And that's the main way to do that. When I was learning, when I played tennis as a young person, I would sometimes go out and hit against a wall.
Yeah.
Which is not the same thing as hitting with a person, but it does give you practice.
Yeah.
Or, now they have ball machines, which will,
shoot
and so
the ball to you. Yeah.
I feel like it's a way you can train your brain. So the times when I feel like I get the most out of AI is when I can go back and forth with it and kind of argue with it sometimes. Now, again, I don't want to assume the AI is always, so to do that, you can't assume the AI is always right. So I found that that's very helpful because, people are not always willing to let you wear them out telling you, how it is, right? Your family's always hears your sermon 2 or 3 times before you ever preach it in church. And after a while, there's no one around for you to kind of bounce your ideas off of. So that's one use. Another use of AI is that it is able to collect and analyze lots of data and lots of patterns very quickly. So, for example, if I am querying AI about, let's say, I've got a question about a verse in Judges and what it means, what answer will the AI give me? Well, it'll give me answers based on what people have said about it. In other words, it goes out and finds what people say, and it kind of puts it all together and tries to package it and make sense out of it and then give me an answer. So the quality is only as good as the answer people give it. I'm not really using the AI as the authority to tell me what to believe about it. I am basically using the AI as a way of practicing what I think about it and getting responses back. And so I think it's a great tool for that because I have access to it all the time. I don't have to find somebody else that I can bend their ear theologically.
When you start your research, because I love the idea, use it for brainstorming versus authority. I think if we don't take anything else away from this podcast, we can take that. We're going to take a lot, but anyway. All right, so when you said a few minutes ago, you said that you tell AI, I am a conservative, Bible-believing Baptist or whatever. Do you do that? You do that in the beginning as you're doing as you're querying or prompting AI? Is that what you do?
Yeah, that would be like my initial prompt.
Initial prompt. Okay, now go ahead. I just wanted to make sure I got that.
So I would put that in the initial prompt, then I would ask it the first question.
Got it.
And
Okay.
then we would get into the discussion.
Got it. Okay.
And as I do that, it's important. One thing that's a real blessing, I think, for us is that although in our culture, oftentimes, at least the elite culture, the educated culture, however you want to put it, they tend to have less respect for conservative Bible-believing people in
Right.
how they interpret the Bible and religion and all of that than they do people that would be more of a liberal position.
Yes.
But the other side of that is, and I can't quantify this, but the other side of that is I have the sense that evangelical people and conservative people write a lot more and put it out there on the internet.
Okay.
Because if you really look out there, there's just a lot of people putting out a lot of great content.
Sure.
Now, not all content's great. Some of it's lousy, but there are a lot of people that are really, and I think this has to do with their sense of mission, right? I want to get the word out. I love the word of God. And
Sure.
so I'm not necessarily out there to get paid. And so I think and conservative people take the Bible more seriously and therefore tend to want to say more about what it says.
Yeah.
And spend more time talking about it. So there is a huge amount of literature out there that discusses these kinds of things. And so if I prompt it correctly to sort of get away from what I'd call heterodox or type answers, then I can oftentimes get some great ideas. So in that sense, it can be kind of like a commentary to the extent it has access to those kinds of sources. I would not use it as a substitute for a commentary, certainly not for technical commentary.
Right.
But the other day I was at a family outing and we were just talking about it. And so I've got the little the personal co-pilot thing on my phone, and I'm just talking to it. And I asked it to talk about the use of some of the different words, different Greek forms in the Great Commission. So I asked about the verb that's translated go, which is a participle.
Yeah. And
it told me what it was, and it said it could mean this, it could mean as you're going. And I said, could it be an attendant circumstance participle? And it said yes. And so it's like, wow, there's stuff because people have posted stuff on the internet about that. In fact, there are people that post things that are scholarly journals, right? Mm-hmm. Conservative, exegetical, scholarly journals. So, there is a wealth of information there that's available, but you can't just take everything, obviously, at face value. You wouldn't do that if you're reading a commentary.
No.
You
wouldn't take brainstorming
it
versus authoritative. But you can do a lot of research or data gathering, and then you got to discern what is accurate for what you're using it for, right? And for the style. I mean, I use I'm a podcast person, not an author. So when I have to create something in writing, I put my original draft in AI and I say, create a professional email stating this. And it's really amazing how it comes back and really cleans it up. So,
yeah. There's another thing it's good for, and that is it's good at organizing data.
Such as?
In other words, well, for example, if I've done some heavy-duty research on a topic, I've got a massive amount of stuff I've collected, either in documents or even I've written a lot of different notes. I've got all of this. It's this big fur ball in my mind, right?
Okay.
And so I said, okay, can you organize this logically, or organize it 5 different ways logically? And it can actually go and say, okay, you could organize it this way and explain how all the data fits together this way and that way and the other way. And I'm like, oh, that's an idea. So it's an idea generator, and it would help me then. And I say, I like this one. I don't like this one. I like this one, but I like to change it. And so, you're in charge of the process, but it does have the ability to kind of, it can do things. Your brain you run out of cranium.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you're trying to get your head around some of these concepts. And so it can be helpful in that way as well.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, you have covered a lot of material here. So just let me ask you in closing, again, this conversation came from an article Dr. Shumate wrote, again, February 2025, issue of Frontline, AI interview with Spurgeon. And so that's what generated this conversation. And so, I mean, anything else in general you want to comment? Because you've thrown a lot at us. I think now it's time for us to go and exercise some of the things you have talked about to learn for ourselves how we can use it in an effective and efficient way. Other comments? Any warnings you want to put out there? Any other warnings or encouragements?
Well, when it comes to warnings, let me, and this I've just kind of been in the back of my mind for some time since the AI issue came out. AI is a tool, and it's a very powerful tool. Just like an automobile, it is potentially very, very useful. It's also potentially very dangerous. And not only that, it changes you, right? And I wish now I remembered the name of the book. There was one of the books that was reviewed or was discussed anyway in the Frontline, but it was talking about technology. And the idea is that, and so I want to make sure to give credit, but his point was that technology can be used for good or evil, but also technology is not neutral, even when it's not evil or it's not neutral. What he meant by that is it changes you.
Yes.
When we drive everywhere, that changes us physically. It changes our perception of time. And so AI is any technology, AI affects the way we think. So we have to pay attention both to the dangers of it that are straight up, right? And a lot of uses of AI are just frankly wicked. And I would say, let me say this about the ministry. The thing AI can't do, you cannot have a relationship with AI.
There you go. Yeah.
It's great at natural language processing and communication, and so it can express sympathy. It can, but it's all simulated. You're not having a relationship. We can have relationship with God, and we can have relationship with other people.
Right.
And so the true relationships will never be replaced by AI, which means as a pastor, that's really foundational. Yes. I can gain knowledge, but if preaching is truth through personality, then I got to run the truth through my personality. I can't just mimic.
Right.
And we've seen that, right? In the past,
Sure.
if some, you really do need to prepare your own sermons, right? Yeah. You're not just copying someone else's sermon because it's not you. There's where is you in there, right? You're just like an actor mouthing lines. And so that's just as true in the day of AI as it is before AI. And so I can use it as a tool to help me express what God is teaching me through the text. I can use it to help as a tool to just dig out what God's teaching me, and I can use it as a tool to help me find ways to express what God is telling me. But it has to be what God's telling me, and I think that's foundational. Amen. And then, of course, we need to be able to warn our people. It's a totally different topic. We have to be able to warn our people against the dangers of AI. One of them, I think, is this sort of phony relationships that AI companions, and it's just there's a huge danger, I think, in a lot of that, and I think a lot of use of AI is not good. And so but that's a pastoral concern, not so much what we're talking about today. And then the final point is I got to be careful that I'm alert to how the use of the technology might be changing me, my habits of mind, and my spiritual walk, and just make sure that I am profiting from it and using it in a way that's profitable for others, instead of trying to avoid doing the hard work.
Amen. That's well said. All right. Well, Dr. Shumate, again, appreciate your time so much. I mean, there is a lot for people to digest here, and appreciate the way you've put it forth in this article, as well as the way you have been using it in your life, and just giving us a lot to think about. So again, it's a brainstorming, not authoritative. And I guess my main concern is yours. We cannot allow it to take the place of our personal study of a passage, interacting with God, allowing the Holy Spirit to teach us what we need to proclaim. And again, we need a clear conscience when we enter the pulpit. We need to make sure we have done our time in prayer and study and preparation to deliver the Word of God and minister the Word of God with a clear conscience, and not depend on these are simply tools, but these tools cannot change us. It's got to be the Word of God and the Spirit of God.
That last point is so important. You know the difference between, you can preach the same sermon with power and the same sermon without power. Yeah. And I've got to have the power of the Spirit, because I'm walking closely with God.
Amen. Okay, Dr. David Shumate, again, thanks for interacting with us, and thanks for your time. You can find Dr. Shumate at International Baptist College in Arizona. Again, thanks for your time. And again, thanks for investing in so many other people. You do it in the classroom, and you do it through podcasts, you do it through preaching. So we greatly appreciate your ministry. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
You're listening to ReChurch, a podcast of Gospel Fellowship Association Missions. If you would like more information about our ministry or how we may assist you and your church, visit us at gfamissions.org/consulting.